I just got to show how the libertarian free market network is extensive and all pervasive. When I got to Fred's house today and I came in from my plane rides, I was handed a letter from somebody at Stanford who had seen a newspaper article on Polish economy. He wanted me to have it as I spoke. I mean, that's terrific, you know. With a budget of $2, the libertarian movement is doing pretty well. The socialism is now, I think, intellectually and even as reputation in general is dead from the neck up. Socialism used to be defined, I would still define it, I mean, if you want to define socialism, as the government ownership of the means of production, okay, or at least control of the means of production. Ownership in the sense of being able to dominate and use the means of production. Hope you can all hear me. And the interesting thing about the socialist system, since half the world is now socialist, in this sense, interesting thing about socialism is that as one after the other country went socialist, the socialists in the United States said, that's not socialism. That's not what I meant by it. I meant something much more humanistic and lovable. And so each socialism, each empirical record of socialism has been repudiated in turn. So that we have a very peculiar situation where the socialists in the Western world keep saying that's not socialism. If you keep, go down the record, okay, let's see what Cambodia did, for example, under Pol Pot, killing 1/3 of the population, et cetera, et cetera. That's not social. That's not what we meant by socialism. We meant by socialism something people sit around and read Plato. So they keep denying the responsibility for the consequences of their own position. The socialism, I don't think, has a very good reputation anymore. And certainly in the Eastern European countries, I'll get to that in a minute, doesn't have a very good reputation either. Probably a less good reputation than it does here. The article I was sent was from the Los Angeles Times for December 26th, which says rules bent to work Poland's crazy quote economy. And it's a dateline from Warsaw, Los Angeles Times. It starts off by saying that the manager of a coal mine in Silesia won official praise and bonuses for the mine's impressive production. But that was before the authorities discovered he had ordered his workers to mix rock with the coal pulled out of the mine to boost production figures. And this sort of sums things up. In a socialist country, you don't have a real price system. I'll get to that a little later, too. You don't have a price system. There's no profit and loss test. And so almost inevitably, the socialist managers decide on quantitative figures. You produce, X million board feet of lumber, or of coal in this case. Well, okay, if the managers who are quite intelligent, they know that their brownie points, if they produce a lot of board feet of lumber or a lot of coal, they get promoted or get raises. If they produce less, they get demoted or maybe sometimes go to the rock pile. So they do their best. The economic incentive they have is to boost quantitative figures, even if half the people sort of break their leg in the attempt. In the case of coal, if you mix rock with coal, you obviously can get more coal per unit effort. So that's what they did. In the case of the Soviet Union, years ago, they measured by board feet. You produce, X million board feet of lumber. So they produced X million board feet, except they were very, very narrow pieces of lumber. Okay? So, if you don't have or they produce nails, but the nails buckle every time you try to hammer the nail. So you have a situation where if you go by quantitative figures, you always get messed up. Not in the sense of the Polish disease. And they go on to say, it's kind of cute, as one Westerner in Warsaw put it about Poland, about the crazy, quote, economic regulations. Everybody's ripping off everybody else, and since government agencies are the biggest and most tempting targets, they are being ripped off more than anyone else. Okay. And they had done this by pure, by mineral quantitative coal production and all that, and so this is what happened. So this is just one indication, one small microcosm of what happens in socialist countries in general. The managers take over. Indeed, there's nobody else to take over. The managers, there's no price system, there's no rational economic allocation. And so the managers take over, and run things on the basis of what the central planners, what rules the central planners lay down, whether it's board feet or tons of coal or whatever. One interesting thing is, and one of my least favorite economists, John Kenneth Galbraith, claims that in the United States, the managers have taken over. They're really running things. The stockholders don't matter. The managers are operating the corporations for their own purposes. Well, I think it's a lot of baloney, but the point is, there is an area of the economy, both in the United States and the rest of the world, where this happens. The managers have taken over, which somehow Galbraith never mentions, namely government. Government agencies, government bureaus, the post office, and all of Poland and all of Russia and everything else. This is the managerial revolution. Managers have taken over. They've messed everything up quite clearly. I remember, by the way, when I was growing up, there used to be radio debates and about socialism versus capitalism. And they usually have the socialists were usually Norman Thomas, who ran, seems like 20 times for president. Must have been less than that. Anyway, it seemed like it. Perennial Socialist Party candidate for president. And the capitalist was always some, well, I guess I shouldn't say dumb, but less than articulate congressman somewhere, right? Republican congressman. And this would be the the opposition. And the socialists, and Norman Thomas, whoever, would say the following: look, we don't want to threaten anybody. All we want is a world run like a post office. Right? Government has to run the post office, right. Of course, the Republican congressman always say, of course, government has to run the post office. And then Norman Thomas, whoever, always win the debate. Now, of course, nobody would ever say that now. The post office is so messed up that no socialist would dare to say we want the world run like a post office. Because, of course, the post office is a situation where not only the prices keep going up all the time, which is true in general. Prices always go up for reasons which I can't go into, but it's caused by government, believe me. Trust me on that. Prices always go up, but also the quality always goes down. At least in private enterprise, the quality of products usually goes up. Computers get better, and TV sets get better, and whatever. But the post office, of course, the quality is always going down. So the quality of service. I remember, I'm old enough to remember. One of the few advantages of being older is that you can still remember what happened 40 years ago. I can remember quite clearly that they used to pick up the mail and deliver the mail twice a day in your apartment. Twice a day. Once at 9 a.m. and once at 1 p.m. Now, of course, that's all shot, and Saturday mail is next to go, of course. So there's a constant decline in service along with, and of course, the mail takes longer to get there. Friends of mine in Canada are tearing their hair out. The postal service is even worse than here. Also, of course, socialized postal service, where it literally takes 3 weeks to get a letter from here to Canada. Okay, so I'm not talking about out on the tundra, with the Eskimos. I'm talking about in the cities. All right, at any rate, that's another thing. Since I'm on Galbraith anyway, I'll tangentially admit it's a tangent. That's one of my favorite topics. Galbraith in the affluent society is always attacking advertising, the evils of advertising, how people get sucked into buying products because they see pretty girls using Diet Pepsi. and so they rush out to buy Diet Pepsi because they think they can win all these pretty girls and then they keep drinking it. The real, I don't know anybody who buys Diet Pepsi for that reason, but anyway, let's set that aside. The really fraudulent advertising is government advertising. Politicians who claim they're going to cure this, that, and the other thing never do it. And all the rest of it. And Galbraith never mentions that. Never in his book does he talk about government advertising, which is the real fraudulent area, because that's the area where the consumers have no check. See, if somebody holds up Diet Pepsi and say, boy, that's good, and you rush out and say, boy, if this pretty girl likes it, or if Too Tall Jones likes it, you'll rush out and buy it because they like it. I mean, if you're really a moron, maybe you'll think that way. And you rush out and drink it. If you don't like it, that's the last Diet Pepsi you'll ever drink. Okay? In other words, there's a market test for Diet Pepsi. If it works, in your sense, then you'll keep buying it. If it doesn't work, you won't buy it. There's no market test for government. It's all very cloudy. Every 4 years, you elect somebody who's about the same as somebody else, and then 4 years later, you've forgotten what he said, because it's all one big 4-year package deal. The consumer, in other words, the voter, has no chance to vote on specific issues. So there's the real fraud. There's the real advertising problem. Galbraith never mentions it. Never, ever, ever. Not only Galbraith, but all the other Galbraithians. Okay, that's the end of my Galbraith lecture for tonight. Okay, the basic in socialism, getting the more theoretical aspect of socialism in general. The socialists have always realized that they have a problem. Okay, they've always realized. I'm talking about Pol Pot and embarrassing things like that. They've always realized for many years they have a basic economic problem. Namely, as it used to be summed up when I was growing up, who's going to take out the garbage? Okay? The socialist society. If everybody gets equal income, et cetera, everybody does what he wants to do, whatever it is, who's going to take out the garbage? Well, it's an interesting question. It's a very profound question. It's essentially the incentive problem. Who will have the incentive to go out there and shovel garbage 8 hours a day or 10 hours a day or whatever? And this has been recognized by the socialists. Because the basic socialist view is, the basic really gut socialist view is summed up in the famous Marxian slogan, from each according to his ability, to each according to his needs. Now we have to add her ability, her needs to this. Okay? So everybody contributes, it's sort of like a common heap. Everybody works very hard for the collective and contributes his or her production of the common heap, whatever the production is, as fast as he can because he's working for the collective, and then he takes out whatever he needs. Okay? Sounds terrific, maybe. It doesn't sound terrific to me, but maybe to some people it sounds terrific. At any rate, the socialists, sort of the more sophisticated socialists, immediately recognized they had a problem here. Problem? There's kind of a negative incentive here. In other words, if you're a member of a huge collective who's going out and working hard and contributing to the heap, the incentive is not to work very hard, to sort of goof off and snooze behind the tree and then zip in and acquire your needs. Okay? Because whatever you do doesn't contribute much to the common heap. It contributes maybe 1/1,000,000th. If you work very hard, you contribute 1/1,000,000th more to the common heap. It's nothing. It's peanuts. On the other hand, you can grab from the common heap. That's it's 100% for your own consumption. So that's a real problem. It's an obvious problem. Who's going to take out the garbage in social society? There's a couple of little examples of this I can mention. So interesting. When the United States was founded, when North America was founded, the first two colonies were Plymouth Rock in Massachusetts and the Jamestown colony in Virginia. Both of them engaged immediately in communism. I'm using communism in a small c, in other words, a philosophic sense. In other words, they both had a communal, they were run by a corporation from England, and there was no private property. Everybody was supposed to contribute to the common heap, whatever grain he grew and all that sort of stuff, and then take whatever he needed from the common store. They engaged in a pure communist system. Not only didn't it work, but everybody was starving as a result. And the thing is, it didn't work even though everybody knew they were starving. First of all, there weren't 200 million people in Jamestown. There were only a couple of thousand. It still didn't work. In other words, even though everybody knew in their gut they didn't produce more wheat, they'd starve, everybody knew in his heart, despite all the exhortations by the head of the colony, all the moral injunctions, each person knew in their heart, I mean, if I work 20 hours a day, it's not going to contribute much to the common heap. So what the hell with it? But if I grab from the common heap, it contributes a lot to me. So the result is nobody worked much and everybody grabbed. The result, no more wheat left. Okay. So we had a fundamental situation where both in Jamestown and in Plymouth Rock, the colony almost died out from starvation. Finally, driven to the in extremis, even though it went against their ideological preconceptions, the heads of the governors of Plymouth colony and Virginia said, well, gee, I'm sorry, folks. They use much more elegant 17th century language. I'm sorry, folks. I guess we have to have private property. And we will now have every person having 30 acres or whatever it is. Each person will get whatever he grows. And bingo, presto, changeo, the colony flourished, starvation was over, and everybody was prosperous. Now this made a tremendous impact, a sort of a practical impact on the American colonists, because they saw right away communism leads to starvation and private property leads to prosperity. It was a very simple, sort of a controlled experiment in a sense. Okay, so that's one point I will mention. Another interesting point, which is purely fictional, but it's kind of interesting anyway. A beautiful, very, very funny novel appeared a couple of years ago by Sarah McFadden called Serial, about Marin County and the crazies who infest it in California. And she went to an urban commune. In other words, lived in a house with 10 people or something, none of whom knew each other, but they were all supposed to be communal. And she noticed very quickly that there's one guy there who never washed his own dishes. Always left it to the rest of the commune to wash his dishes. And when she challenged him on that, he said, "I'm not into dishes." So I think it's like, I don't know anybody who is into dishes, but at any rate. So that commune collapsed pretty quickly too. And this is only like 10 people, it's not even like several hundred. Okay, so the incentive then is negative. And socialists, I think, have realized for a long time they have an incentive problem. What then to do about it? Well, there's several ways of handling it. In the New Left period, it was quite common to say, well, it's true, everybody should get according to his needs, but we scale down the needs. I know who's the we here. I mean, it gets kind of fuzzy. Everybody should have very little needs. You see, if everybody we're willing to subsist on only yogurt and dried nuts and whatever, and electronic guitars, of course, then that has to come in too. Then we wouldn't need much, and then the whole problem would be sort of eliminated. I don't think that's going to get very far either. The one problem with that is, you see, who determines who needs what? I was arguing with a socialist one time, and he said, well, we'll have a computer. We established a socialist commonwealth. A computer will figure out, we'll plug in everybody's needs, and we assign the needs to everybody, and it's all very simple. You don't need any prices of private property. And I say, yeah, but I need a lot of things, baby. I need yachts, and I need I need 10,000 books, and big stereo sets. How about that? He said, well, of course, needs have to be reasonable. The other question is, who defines the other person's reasonable needs? Obviously, some damn collective, it's some committee or whatever is going to define, you need such and such. Well, I think this guy he doesn't need to go, et cetera, et cetera. And you wind up with a totalitarian system. Okay. But even if you do that, so what about the supply problem? How do you get people to work hard if they know they themselves are not going to benefit much? It's all going to go to the collective. And so the basic socialist answer to that is quite, well, it's simple in theory, it's not so simple in practice. The basic socialist answer to that, the way we overcome the incentive problem is by transforming human nature. Create the new socialist man, capital N, capital S, capital M, or the new socialist woman. The new socialist man will be different. He or she won't be acquisitive, won't be worried about the fact that if he works 20 more hours, he'll get only one peanut. He will be happy and proud and honored to work for the collective, work his guts out for the collective. Right? And that's the sort of man we have to transform. This is, I think, the basic reason why Soviet Russia and China, etc., Cambodia, whatever, when they got in, they tried using every sort of coercive method. Because obviously it has to be coerced. How else are you going to do it? To try to use all sorts of brainwashing, torture methods, to try to transform human nature fast. To try to shape everybody up to have this mold of a new altruist man who will then work hard for the collective. I remember, fortunately, of course, that didn't work. I remember I saw a fellow traveling movie about China about 10, 15 years ago, where everybody was a chilling series of interviews by the interviewer with supposed to be a typical Chinese family, and they said, well, what do you want your children to be when they grow up? And they said, we want them to work hard for the collective. And the question is, did they really mean it? Were they really brainwashed to that extent? Was the human spirit so deteriorated and smashed that they really thought this way? Were they really robots? Well, fortunately, my friend or acquaintance Gordon Tullock, who's some of you may know as a distinguished economist, he started off in life as a Chinese expert. He was a China hand in the State Department, and was then prisoner of Chinese communists when they took over in 1949. Anyway, so I asked him, well, you're the China expert. Are the Chinese really, the 600 million Chinese, they really love the state? No, forget it. He says, in ancient Chinese tradition, they always tell the boss, somebody coming from Peking or Nanking, they always tell him what he wants to hear. On the local level, they think it's all baloney. Of course, it turns out he was right. In other words, it turns out after 20, 30 years of brainwashing, the free market is making a remarkable comeback in China. The guys who are responsible for so-called transformation of the new socialist man, now in jail or being locked up and being in prison or whatever. So this, but see, this comes right in. If you're supposed to be working hard not to get, this is, in the socialist world, this is the so-called argument between material incentives and moral incentives. The new socialist man will not be interested in mere material income. He or she will work his guts out for moral incentives. What's the moral incentive mean? Well, it means like a medal, hero of Stakhanovite labor, or hero of the Chinese Revolution. Okay. Well, fortunately, it didn't seem to work. And the moral incentives have always collapsed. This was the big debate in Cuba between Castro and Che Guevara. Che Guevara being in favor of moral incentives, and finally they had to send him off to Bolivia to get shot, and shifted over to material incentives. So it seems pretty clear then that the new socialist man hasn't worked. There is no new socialist man. There's just a bunch of people who are looking for material incentives and trying hard to get it. Friends of mine who were Russian experts who visited Russia recently said that nobody believes in this junk anymore. Nobody's a Marxist in Russia anymore. They don't believe in the government. They're all purely cynical. They're just caught in this bureaucratic thing. They're trying to do the best they can within this, this maze, which I think links up to all the other information we were getting out of there. At any rate, this new socialist man solution, which turns out to be faulty to say the least, is really the origin of the old theory, which you don't hear so much anymore, but I heard when I was growing up. Socialism is beautiful in theory, but can't work in practice. Socialism is the moral position, and it's beautiful and moral, but somehow doesn't work. It's impractical. Okay. After Pol Pot and Stalin and Mao and so forth, it doesn't seem so beautiful anymore, or even so moral. So you don't hear that much anymore, but this is the origin of that, because in other words, the idea is we're trying to transform human nature. We're trying to get everybody to work their guts out for the collective. And if we fail, it's because human nature is recalcitrant. Okay? It doesn't seem to work. Okay, without going into the moral critique of Pol Pot, as far as I'm concerned, working your guts out for the collective is not very moral. Quite the contrary. But I'm here as an economist rather than a moralist. So I will press on to saying this, that the real problem of socialism hasn't even been touched yet. Because the real interesting thing here is, from an economic point of view, is that even if you transform socialism, even if you created a whole bunch of 200 million robots in Russia and 500 million, 800 million robots in China, and all that, and they're all out gung-ho to work for the collective, they didn't care, let their throats be cut as long as the sugar crop increased by 2%. Even there, what are they going to do? So even if you got them, even if you transform them, even if you solve the incentive problem, these poor people, who are 2 billion people trying to work for the collective, they wouldn't know what to do. How are they going to work for the collective? What are they going to do? Should they grow sugar? Should they grow wheat? Should they make machines of some sort? Should they, grow copper? Mine copper? Who's going to tell them how do they know what to do? They don't know the damn thing what to do. All they know is they should work hard. Let's say they absorb that, okay? Well, work hard. What are they going to work hard at? Blank out. Nobody knows. And the problem, the economic problem with socialism is the government doesn't know either. There's no rational way of figuring out what these people should be doing. After you finally brainwash them and transform their nature, supposedly, they don't know what to do. They're gung-ho, point me to something. Nobody knows what to tell them to do. Because there's no price system, there's no private ownership of the means of production, there's therefore no price system, there's therefore no way that any government planner can tell what's scarce and what isn't scarce. For example, supposing the United States, supposing the world was collectivist, we're in a world communist state. There's no market anywhere. Black markets have been stamped out. Actually, the only reason why Russia exists right now is because they have a vast black market. Anyway, setting that aside. And in America, the planners in Washington are trying to decide what to do. What do we do? Where do we allocate resources? And somebody says, I think it would be a great idea if we build a platinum and gold line tunnel from New York to San Francisco. Why not? Okay? So what's the problem with that? Well, you might say it's too costly. What do you mean too costly? How do you know what the costs are? Nobody knows what the costs are. Nobody knows what the cost of platinum would be or gold or anything else. There'd be no way of comparing. I mean, let's assume it's technologically feasible to do it. There's no way of deciding whether that's better or whether you should build a couple of steel plants somewhere or strip mine something. Nobody knows anything because it's all a sea and a fog of pure chaos. This insight was first provided to the world by my mentor Ludwig von Mises in his article in 1920, and it set the socialists on their ear in Europe. And they had all sorts of very complex solutions on how to try to solve this problem. We'll create a kind of a market. We'll pretend it's a market. We'll tell everybody it's plain market is what it really amounts to. This is the famous Longa solution. We order to the managers. We tell the socialist managers, go out there and pretend you own your corporation and play market, right? And then you'll have an exchange and all that sort of stuff. Obviously, playing market is sort of like playing Monopoly or something. It's really pointless, ridiculous. The market only exists if you're really committing your resources, if you're willing to sacrifice some resources to get something else. If I'm willing to shell out 25 cents for the New York Times, that's a market. If I'm willing to pay $10,000 for some machine, that's a market. Plain money doesn't make it. Because anybody can do that. I mean, I can be a whiz I can invest $2 million in plain money in the stock market. I don't care what happens. Okay, so this is and the Longa solution, Longa and Lerner and these people were trying to come up with a so-called economic market argument for socialism, really stuck to consumer goods. They kept saying, well, there's no real problem. You produce a certain number of pieces of bubble gum. Then you have a stock of bubble gum. If you want to know what the price is, you raise the price. And if you find out there's too much bubble gum around, you lower the price. And if you find out there's too much that's going too fast, you raise the price. You sort of adjust the price on the basis of inventory. Okay? So that's, there's no problem. What are you bellyaching about? Well, this is fine provided you've already produced the bubble gum. In other words, on a consumer good level, you can do it. you can produce a certain amount of bubble gum, a certain amount of gear shifts and Wonder Bread and whatever, and then you can adjust the consumer price on the basis of whether the inventory is being cleared or not. But how do you know how much to produce in the first place? How do you know how much bubble gum to produce or Wonder Bread to produce to begin with? You don't know. That's the whole point. Because there's no producer's good market. There's no market for capital goods, for raw materials. Everything is chaos until you get to the consumer goods market. So this insight of Mises was never really answered by the socialists. The one point always struck me also, and I read the Longa and Lerner and these people and trying to say that socialism can calculate. One point that struck me was if they're so, Longa kept saying, well, look, we can duplicate the market, we can make it in such a way, et cetera, et cetera. And this thing that struck me when I was reading it in college, well, if he's so anxious to duplicate the market, why not have the market to begin with? Forget about all the socialism junk. So, it seemed simpler to do it that way, at the very best. At any rate, and so supposing, for example, make it concrete, let's take allocation of labor under socialism. I've talked about allocation of consumer goods. Let's take labor, because we've talked about that already, working gung-ho for the state. Supposing I come around and the committee, because some committee is going to allocate my labor, right? And there's a socialist planning committee. We're going to find out what my needs are and where I should best serve society or the collective of the state. I come to them and say, look, well, gee, fellas, I really love to shovel garbage for the glory of the collective. I mean, I'm really, there's nothing I won't do for the collective. But I really think that I can serve the collective better by banging the drums, by blowing the kazoo, which by acting, by imitating the collective president, whoever it is. Right? That's my area of expertise. That's my area in which I can serve the collective best. And so it's not that I don't want to shovel garbage. I love to shovel garbage, but I really think I'd serve. What criteria will these guys have to say that I'm wrong or right? In other words, how do they know whether I serve the collective best by putting on a performance, imitating the collective chairman and vice chairman, or by blowing the kazoo or whatever? There's no criterion. There's no real criterion to figure out anything here. And so whatever decision they make is going to be arbitrary. If they like me, they say, okay, Rothbard, go and blow the kazoo. If they don't like me, they'll send me on the garbage shoveling detail. Okay, so we get, in other words, to the point, since there's no rational criterion, there's no rational criterion of economic calculation, such as we have in the free market under a price system and a profit and loss test. The criterion is all arbitrary. All right, go out there and we don't like you and you're trouble. Who are they going to send, for example, to Siberia? Or to, what's the equivalent of Siberia here? I don't want to irritate anybody. Montana? Anyway. Northern Alaska, okay? Who are we going to send to Alaska? We have to send somebody to Alaska and we want to have a pipeline. Who are you going to send? Who are you going to decide to go to build a pipeline in Alaska? Well, who are they going to send there? They're going to send, Comrade so-and-so, he's a troublemaker. He's been bellyaching about the collective recently. Let's toughen him up by sending him to northern Alaska. And so in other words, when you get a system of centralized planning, you almost inevitably have a Siberian solution. I mean, in other words, Lenin and Stalin start shipping their opponents to Siberia, which is, a non-preferred residential area. Because, see, somebody's got to be sent to Siberia. Who are you going to send there? You'll send the guys you want to get rid of. Okay? In other words, all bets are off in a socialist system. It's all who you know, who you don't know, who hates you, who doesn't like you. All of life is politicized, which is really a really ultimate horror as far as I'm concerned. All of life everything becomes a political decision. So, I got one example I remember about how labor is allocated under socialism. Cuba, I don't know if you remember, about slightly less than 20 years ago, Castro decided we have to produce 10 million tons of sugar in Cuba for some obscure reason. 10 million tons is it. He puts on a big 10 million tons campaign. But the world will collapse if there's less than 10 million tons. The world will be saved, or Cuba will be saved with 10 million. And so all American leftists rushed down to Cuba, the so-called Venceremos Brigade, to cut cane. And they were ardently in favor of the Cuban collective. They're going to cut cane. I knew a couple of these people, and they cut cane. What happened was they didn't know a damn thing about cane cutting, obviously. They spent all their lives in New York City. It's not exactly a sugar-growing area. They were chopping each other in the back with machetes. If anything, they were counterproductive. Less sugar was being grown for their efforts than more. Or you have in Maoist China, you have a Kill the Starling month. Everybody's go out there and kill starlings month. I mean, it's a monstrous system. I say it's the only way you can handle it. I mean, how do you allocate labor if you can't have a free wage system? In other words, if some company wants to build a pipeline now in Alaska, which they did, who decides who goes up to Alaska? Well, the way they did it, of course, they pay very high wages. You make a fortune if you want to go schlep up to Alaska and work on the pipeline. And a lot of people did it, okay? And since there's nothing to spend on Alaska, you save it all up, all right? So that was the free choice of people, go up to Alaska. But in a socialist system or a communist system where free wage market is not allowed, where everything is supposed to be done by moral incentives, aside from one or two nuts who might really want to go to Alaska and work for the collective, they're shipped out by coercion. In other words, the dissidents, the troublemakers, the guys who are looking cross-eyed at you, might vote against you in the next cell meeting, he gets shipped out of Alaska. All right. The calculation problem begins in Russia. When the communists took over in Russia in 1917, what are they supposed to do? They're supposed to inaugurate communism. That was the whole point, right? The first thing they did was they tried to abolish money, abolish the market, and have everybody contribute to the common heap, which is what they were advocating for the previous 75 years or so. This was called war communism, as Paul Craig Roberts points out in his excellent book, which I recommend everybody. The war communism, which lasted from about 1917 to 1920, 21, was not just a war situation. It was a dedicated ideological thing. The communists get in, they finally achieve power. What are they supposed to do? They're supposed to put into effect their goals, namely smash the market, smash commodity production and money. Everybody will then contribute to the common heap. Well, the whole thing fell apart. Peasants weren't getting money, so they didn't contribute anything to the common heap. They had to start killing peasants, and the whole thing just broke down. Nobody ate any food. So what then happened was that Lenin, being a very shrewd pragmatist, finally decided either communist ideology or else we all get shot. And so he just gave up. He totally retreated, went back to the so-called new economic policy, or NEP, which really reestablished capitalism or semi-capitalism for about most of the 1920s. And so people started eating again, and Russia was saved. So this was an ideological attempt which didn't work. Same thing happened in Pol Pot in Cambodia. The difference in Cambodia, first thing the Cambodian people were there, the Cambodians were an interesting group. They were, first of all, they were all about 14 years old. So. Second of all, they had just come out of the jungle after about 10, 15 years of fighting in the jungle. So they were sort of isolated from all other influences. And third of all, they all studied in France, which is always a bad thing to begin with. And they studied under French Marxist, Maoist, whatever, Marcusian, whatever they are there, Althusserians. And so they decided to not only crush all money, they abolished money. Okay? Now you might think this is only, so what if money is abolished? After all, it's just materialism. Why should we be so concerned? Why are we pro-money? Free market economists have always been accused of being materialistic and being pro-money. I'm pro-money mostly because I don't have any. But the point about the money thing is there's a direct correlation between money and freedom. See, if you earn money, in other words, if you get $10,000 a year, let's say, from your employer or whoever, and you go out and you spend it on whatever you want, right? In other words, you can buy things, you can not buy things, you can save. You have your freedom to allocate your income. But if there's no money, it means you eat or you get whatever is handed out to you by the government authorities, by your cell group or committee or whatever it is. Okay, comrade, 3 bowls of rice and that's it. There's no way to get around this. You can't buy anything because money's been abolished. It's a diabolic thing. I mean, it's probably the worst single thing that can happen to anybody's freedom is for money to be abolished, because that's it. Because then you accept whatever you can get from the comrades, who are usually pretty short anyway. And if they don't like the cut of your jib, or if you look too intellectual to them, you get only half a grain of rice per day or whatever. Right? So again, you have a forced labor system coming in almost automatically in Cambodia. The difference between Cambodia and the regular Marxist-Leninist thing is the Cambodians would absorb Rousseau somewhere along the way in France. So you get a weird combination of Lenin and Rousseau. But the idea is that cities are evil to be stamped out immediately, right? So they crushed the city. Of course, everybody started starving very, very quickly. It's sort of like, how should we put it? Sort of like the American back to the land movement going completely berserk, right? It's as if the back of the land people suddenly appeared with arms and machine guns and bazookas and ordered everybody out of Denver and San Francisco and said, go farm somewhere. Right? So anyway, I mean, one thing you have to say about Marx, he did not love the land particularly. So that's one thing in his favor. At any rate, on the economic calculation problem, by the way, one interesting parallel that comes, if you live long enough, things sort of go full circle or whatever. Interesting parallels, convolutions come up. Norman Brown, who was one of the most popular writers in the 1960s, I don't know if anybody's ever heard of him here, wrote, just saying, lunatic book called Love Against Death, which is out in paperback, who extolled irrationality and unreason. Reason is evil and spontaneous, whatever it is great. And he finally gets to socialism somewhere in this muck of the book. I mean, it's very... He suddenly talks about a calculation debate on page whatever it is, 202 or something like that. And he says, here's what he says. He says, Mises and Hayek challenged socialism. They pointed out that socialism can't engage in rational economic calculation. And the trouble with socialism in the 20th century is that the learned these people took them at their word and they tried to show that socialism can calculate. And that's where socialism went bad. The glory of socialism is it shouldn't calculate, should be totally irrational. And shouldn't worry about calculation. Everybody, so interestingly enough, fortunately, nobody's heard of Brown recently, so I think that's, the world works in wondrous ways. We now have a sort of a slightly reprise of this in the latest very highly touted book by George Gilder, who's a right-winger, contrast to Brown being an ultra-leftist. Gilder, in his new book, Wealth and Poverty, says says the great thing about the free market, as contrast to government, is the free market is irrational. and free market can't calculate, and it's free spontaneous giving and all that stuff. So anyway, so as I say, one of the interesting things about history is you learn that the same error keeps popping up over decades and centuries. It gives you an interesting perspective. What's happened in the, I should wind up this thing by talking about what's happening, I think, interesting favorable thing in Eastern Europe. What I think is quite phenomenal what happened in Yugoslavia. I don't think the current Yugoslav system is any great shakes. If you look at what Yugoslavia is now compared to what it was in 1952, it's almost phenomenal. Tito, as we all know, broke with Stalin in 1948. That in itself is not that significant from an economic point of view, but in 1952, largely under the guidance, I think, of Milovan Gilas, who later broke with Tito and so forth, they suddenly came to the conclusion that central planning isn't working. There's something wrong with it, and they started moving very rapidly toward the market, which is really phenomenal. And they've gotten to the point, at this point, I wouldn't say they have a free market. They've gotten to the point, however, where it's very strong elements of free market economy here. The workers really own the plant. It's truly owned in a producer's co-op manner. The individual worker can't sell his share, which is a big defect. But still in all, the plants are all owned like a producer's co-op of the workers. They exchange products freely and with a free price system. The tax rate is pretty low. It's only about 20%, which is a lot lower than the American tax rate. This change came in about in the mid-60s. It was previously like 80 or 90%. So we have a situation now where, and along with this, came a change of attitude among the Yugoslav communists. So that they started saying, well, you have things like this, especially, by the way, in Croatia and Slovenia, where the communist economists are almost free market oriented compared to the rest of Yugoslavia. At any rate, they say things like this: why should we productive, thrifty, hardworking people in Croatia be taxed to support lazy Slavs in Montenegro? Or why should we keep subsidizing? Why should we people be subsidizing these inefficient factories in Albania and the Kosovo region, Albania type region? And also, they think in terms of the Yugoslav mindset. Even the American mindset is something, or at least has been until recently, something like this: if there's a problem, okay, there's a social problem. There's lots of social problems. I can find millions of social problems, such as too many red-headed people have hangnails. Okay, I mean we could spend $10 million on any NEH grant or NSF grant and find out how many old people have hangnails, red-headed old people have hangnails, then count it up. They have hangnails. We've got to do the hangnail gap, or the hangnail problem. We need a crash program, $10 billion in federal aid, eliminate hangnails from the face of the earth. Okay, that's so that's the typical, has been the typical Western American mindset. If there's a problem, pass a law, get a federal grant. If a law creates new problems, such as if you have price control, you have shortages, what do you do then? Well, you create a Gestapo to root out the hoarded oil or whatever it is. In other words, you create new laws, new bureaucracies on top of it. The Yugoslav mindset got to be to the point like this. Well, if they ran into problems, they did and still do, what government intervention can we repeal? Where can we introduce the market to fix this up? This is the kind of mindset I'd like to see us develop. In other words, if we have any problem, okay, what do we repeal next? Where is the government messing things up, and where can we get rid of it? See, that's the kind of mindset which I think we can, just that mindset we can learn from Yugoslavia. They haven't gone far enough, obviously, in Yugoslavia, but that mindset they've interestingly adopted. In the late 60s, they were talking about, the early 70s, before Tito again went a little bit off the rails, which I think he did, they started talking in these terms. They said, well, you know, the workers own the plants, okay, but each individual worker can't own his share. In other words, isn't it unfortunate if a worker retires at the age of 65 or something? Why shouldn't he be able to keep voting? Why shouldn't he be able to pass his share on to his children? And they started talking in terms of a stock market. If we ever get a stock market in Yugoslavia, we can say that the millennium has arrived, free market. They started talking in terms of a stock market, which of course would send any true Marxist spinning in his grave or cutting his throat. And they said, well, we know that the old-fashioned Marxists won't like this, the idea of a stock market. Let's call it socialist people's capitalism. So that's the kind of creative thinking I think I find of interest in the. At any rate, there's one joke, by the way, among economists. I don't know if it's still true, but the joke used to be going around that in any international economic meeting, the Eastern economists, meaning the communist country economists, would talk about the glories of the free market, and the Western economists talk about the glories of planning. Maybe this is changed at this point. At any rate, I think one of the things we need in the economics profession, the Mises-Hayek side of the economic calculation debate is still not very well known for some obscure reason, even among free market economists, even among people who are opposed to socialism. Their view is that the only problem with socialism, Frank Knight, for example, is an excellent free market economist in many ways. His view was that the only problem with socialism is moral and the incentive problem, etc. There's no problem with calculation. I think if we realized there was a calculation problem, it would provide a tremendous new insight and new ammunition just on that basis. And the critique of socialism. It's pretty clear, aside from the moral aspects, which I don't deny. I mean, I think moral aspects are very important. If you also come to the conclusion that socialists can't even calculate what they want to do, in other words, even if you have a socialist planner, even if you assume that he can override consumer sovereignty, if he allocate labor any place he wants, and he still can't do what he wants, this, I think, is a powerful argument against the socialist position. And it's an argument, as I say, which I think has been borne out in practice in all the socialist countries that we know about it. And it was all those from early Virginia and Plymouth Rock communism to Pol Pot. It's all been a very similar record, some of course more brutal than others, but a very similar record of total and abject failure. And I think the failure is systematic. It's not just an accident that every socialist experiment has failed miserably. It's inherent in the nature of the socialist system. Okay, I think that's... Thank you. Thank you very much.
Professor Rothbard, be glad to answer any questions. I think I'll start out with Professor Boulding. You got a question? Or a comment? I see you have your Adam Smith tie on, which is very good. There are 4 Adam Smith ties here tonight. Murray isn't wearing one because they don't make them in bow ties.
That's right. They don't make
right.
The only question I'd like to ask is, in the contrast between socialism and capitalism, that is, what we have is a spectrum of society. So it's pure capitalism never existed either. No society can exist unless the market is supplemented both with regular function and taxes by public goods and what I call a grass economy. And while I agree that the hatred of the market is irrational, it's very useful, it's very useful work. There's a good deal of something see that capitalism is wonderful, it's hard to get people to love it.
Well, no, I love it. Yeah.
There is the problem that the social matrix of the market system, which permits it to function without its own pathology. So the market has pathology, just like everything else does. Everything can go wrong. Well, the Great Depression is a great example.
No, I don't think so. I think Great Depression was caused by government, a Federal Reserve intervention and Hoover's intervention. I can't get off on that because that's another topic. I'm happy to lecture on that some other time, but I don't think,
The internal dynamic of any system exhibits extreme cases. That is, the market system particularly, and the kind of banking government system, in that kind of matrix, it can go badly wrong.
Well, I agree with you in this sense. There are, obviously, in the real world, there is a whole spectrum of cases, and you have semi-social, etc. I don't deny that, obviously. I think pure market economies have existed in the past, but at any rate, and certainly approximations to them. I just think the more market you have, the better it is, and the more government you have, the worse. And so when you get to the point of socialism, obviously, you have an extreme position. I don't see any real market failure, though. I think. I really think that all the economic ills we can think of are caused by government. Initially, of course, they're caused by the fact we all are born in a world without capital equipment and all that. Apart from that, they're caused by government. But that's gets us in a whole other.
Hong Kong is the ideal society.
Beg pardon?
Hong Kong is the ideal society.
Yeah.
Because it does have an Avis Pentagon.
Yeah.
That's all we need.
Yeah, Hong Kong is great. Hong Kong is slipping a little bit since that guy died. Resigned. I forget his name, who was responsible for that. Because now they're slipping and they have a little rent control and stuff. But that's... Hong Kong, by the way, it's an interesting point, because Hong Kong, when I was growing up, the textbooks all said that America is strong and great and prosperous because we have a lot of large natural resources and a big land area, and a lot of wheat and that sort of thing, agriculture and all that, and warm water, whatever. Hong Kong has practically nothing, has no resources, just has a crummy rock, doesn't grow anything except a little bit up on the peninsula there, and there's a huge number of people. And any criteria you think of, it'd be an overpopulated area, and yet it's, of course, flourishing and standard of living is going up, etc. It's all due to freedom. Somebody, you should take the. I don't want to use a favoritism.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay, up there.
When President Leahy introduced you, he did not mention your work, America's Great Depression, which is a favorite of mine. I find that going back to economic depression now. Do you see any new factors or new grounds that we should be thinking about today, or that might change the situation in 1928?
Well, I don't think we have a 1929 situation because there are no longer any checks or limits on the Federal Reserve System money expansion. In those days there was the gold standard, there was various other checks. The Federal Reserve itself could have gone bankrupt, for example. Now we have a bank deposit insurance, and we have no gold check whatsoever, either domestic or international. And there's no statutory limits. The Federal Reserve can theoretically print unlimited amounts of money. So the sky is now the limit. So I don't think we'll ever get a 1929 type depression, because I think it'll be much worse. I think the unfortunate eventual prognosis will be hyper runaway inflation. I don't think we have to get there if we have the will. In other words, we rise up and say stop somewhere or another. But that would be the eventual course. The trouble is, most of my Austrian colleagues are hard money colleagues. When they come to this conclusion, they get a little hopped up about it. They get so enamored of this analysis. They say in 6 months we're going to have runaway inflation. Well, it doesn't work that fast. It's a slow cumulative process, which then finally reaches a critical mass and then goes off. So it takes a long time, but we'll know it when we get to it. The critical point, by the way, the critical point comes when for example, in 1923, when the runaway inflation was just beginning to take hold in Germany, what happens is prices begin to go up much faster than the money supply. The increase in money supply is the major cause. I can't go into point out why this is true. The increase in money supply is the cause of increasing prices. What happens is after inflation has proceeded for many years, inflationary expectations then take over, and people want to spend money as fast as they can. They know damn well the prices will be 20% more next week, right? And so, at that point, people experience what they call a shortage of money, what we now call a liquidity crunch, or whatever you want to call it. Haven't got enough money to pay for the high prices. They then call upon the government, the central bank, to supply them with the money. Okay? In 1923, Rudolf Havenstein, the head of the Central Reichsbank, made a famous speech in which he said, "Don't worry, folks." He said, of course, in much more pedantic German than I'm saying here. "Don't worry, folks. We realize you're suffering from money shortage. We will print unlimited amounts of money until you can catch up." until money supply catches up with prices. Of course, the result was history. Bingo. 2 trillion marks to buy a stick of bubble gum. So Now, you think this is crazy. I mean, when I tell this to my students, they laugh in superior fashion. Of course, we never say that now. In 1973 or 74, I guess it was, when we had our first peacetime double-digit inflation under Nixon, Walter Heller, distinguished former chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors, wrote an article in the Federal Reserve Bank of Philadelphia Quarterly Review in which he said as follows: money supply can't be the cause of higher prices because prices are going up faster in the last year or so than money supply. Therefore, as a matter of fact, the Federal Reserve has a responsibility to keep pumping more money until real cash balances catch up to the status quo, which means, just saying in more sophisticated economic jargon, what Havenstein said before. Now, if Heller had been running the economy, we might have the hyperinflation right now. Fortunately, he wasn't. Fortunately, he was a harmless professor at the University of Minnesota. But I mean, it can get that close, you see, when people start thinking in that kind of terms. Yeah.
You started out by telling how the post office has gone down and down and down, deteriorating quality. I think it'd be interesting to find out what made the post office work so well in the first place, which been doing went down so far. But that's kind of facetious. But you said that you think the more capitalism the better, which you can't literally mean, because if you meant that, that would mean no government at all.
That's right. Yeah, I would make the qualification of what you mean by government. I don't want to be picky about this.
I had a question to ask if you would just allow.
No, but I mean, I just want. No. I mean, by government, I define government as being a tax authority which acquires its revenue by means of coercion, by taxes. Okay. By government, I don't mean police agencies, guards, Pinkertons, courts, things like that, because they can be obviously run and have been run on a private basis. By government, in other words, I mean a tax-coerced organization. Okay, I just want to make clear. It's not that I'm against.
I don't understand what you're saying.
Well, all right. Look.
What government is permissible in your view?
It depends how you define government. I define government. I define government as an institution which acquires its revenue by theft, by coercion. And the only institution in society except the mafia, okay, which is not a respectable, legitimate institution. Okay? Everybody else acquires their income either by sale of product or service or by monetary contributions from members, okay, or donors. Only the government is the only institution in society. Of all the numerous institutions we have, political, social, whatever, the only institution acquires its revenue by going out there and forcing you to pay up. If you don't pay up, you go to jail.
I think there should be no tax.
That's right. Okay, so I mean that would be a clear. It's not that I'm opposed, for example, to carrying the mail or fighting fire or all that. I think they can be done much better and more morally on a private market basis. I'm in favor of everything being marketable. Okay. Okay. Yeah.
We were in China this summer and found out that the markets go up in altitude. We were told firsthand.
Right.
That now it's from each according to his ability to each according to his work.
That's right. Right.
Would you react to what's going on here? And they also have private plots of land.
Yeah. Well, they had private plots of land until I think late 1950s, which was the great proletarian. What was Great Leap Forward? Before that, it was really a semi-socialist economy in a technical sense. In other words, they had lots of private merchants, private plots of land, and all that. It was only the Great Leap Forward Mao decided to crush everything and collectivize. Okay, and every farm had to have its own steel plant. Well, that was a total collapse. But at any rate, and then came, of course, the Great Proletarian Cultural Revolution, which was even more messy. So what they're getting back to essentially is the Great Leap Forward kind of system. They haven't done it yet, but they're planning, presumably, on the path of getting back to a semi-market. Now, how much will be, I don't know. Certainly, their doctrines now are pretty good from that point of view. In other words, capitalism. That's what happens in capitalism: from each according to his ability, to each according to his ability. That's what happens on the market. So I don't know how far they get, because if you allow that one central elite to run everything, obviously they can go off again. They can decide next year, well, the other Madame Chang was really a great. Madame Mao is really great. Chung Ching is really great, and then she's back again and crushes everybody. So you can't trust them. But certainly the course they're on now is infinitely better than they were 2 years ago. It's really sort of a heroic thing. I mean, considering Deng Xiaoping, the current chairman, has totally reversed the Chinese system from a total slave state to an only partial slave state, with parts of market in there, which is, a big change. You look at it in the historical process, it was kind of a heroic act. It was also a heroic act of Mao to try to crush everything, and it was totally nutty and crazy. Sometimes heroism sort of slides over into being nuts. Yeah. Yeah. It's not a consumer goods are good, right? They decided that consumer goods are good. In fact, matter of fact, they wrote an article a couple of years ago after Deng Xiaoping came in that what we really like to have is this sort of society, and they spell it out. It sounds like New York in 1970 or something like that. So in other words, they really changed their philosophic orientation tremendously, and obviously the social pattern hasn't changed that much, but the direction, of course, is much better. I don't know if Shirley MacLaine will go out there and love them again like she loved the Mao people. Of what? Yeah. Well, a lot of I don't know. A lot of the in most of these communist countries, there's this enormous black market. You have to realize statistics are shaky because I understand that Russia, for example, would not really operate without a black market. What happens is the managers have to fill their quotas. My God, I haven't filled my quota. I've got 60 days to go. I'm way behind. A heroic entrepreneur pops up. Tovarish, you want to fulfill your quota? I got 30 good men here. We'll work 50 hours a week, fulfill your quota. All you have to do is to pay me 100,000 rubles out of the till. Thank God, or thanks Brezhnev or whatever. He takes the 100,000 out, he pays them, and it's all under the table. It's all very illegal, but it's done all the time. It's called blat. Blat, I can't pronounce Russian, but and so the whole system is rife with black market, and that's the only way they can really accomplish anything, I can see. But in Yugoslavia too, by the way, the philosophic, when they started shifting the economic picture, they started saying philosophically the individual is more important than the collective. They say things like that, which is total heresy from the communist point of view. So that's very interesting. I think it's an inspiring development. One of the problems I find with conservatives in general is that when a country goes communist, they figure that's it. The iron door is closed and they're ruined forevermore, and we may as well nuke them because it's all hopeless. It's not true, because since socialism falls apart and doesn't work, and since it goes against the human spirit, I'm not very optimistic that freedom will pop up, and I think it has in these countries. The direction starts changing rapidly again. Yeah.
How when does this come to the Polish disease?
Well, the Polish disease is a general term for socialist planning, failure of socialist planning, and failure to allocate labor. Right? What are they going to do with the workers? See, the Polish disease is a general problem. What do you do with unions of government employees? If you have a union in a private company, if the union demands a 20% wage increase, the private company says, well, gee, we can't do that because they'll bankrupt us. You can only get 10%. They agree on 12 or something, right? But in a government situation where the taxpayer pays, how do you know how much to pay a co-worker or whatever? There's really no criterion. And so, how do you know how much to pay the Polish miners or whoever? So, how do you know how much to pay some clerk in the civil service in Washington? There's no real, and certainly in a socialist country, there's no market guide. It's all arbitrary. So in a sense, they have an insoluble problem in Russia. There's no way to combat unionism in a socialist country. Interestingly enough, even though it's supposed to be the communists supposed to be the vanguard of the working class, the government's supposed to be handling everything and paying out money and getting production. How do you deal with a union? What's there to bargain about? It's all thin air, hot air. There's no profit. There's no loss. You can't say, well, people lose money. Nobody loses money. It's all very vague and
What exactly is going on there?
Well, I don't know. It's a big mess. I'm not really an expert on the Polish economy per se. What I meant by the Polish disease is sort of a general problem of socialism. So I really have to defer to somebody else on that. Yeah.
What do you do about public goods such as national defense where everybody benefits and no
I don't want to get into the entire national defense problem now, as you can imagine, it's fairly complex. But I don't think there are such things as public goods, ever. First place, supposing I'm a pacifist. I know some of my best friends are pacifists. And to a pacifist who thinks all violence is evil, it's not a public good, it's a public bad. It's a public evil. He's being taxed to increase what he thinks is evil and destructive and death-dealing. So, and if you have at least one pacifist in any country, I think we can indicate there's at least one pacifist in the United States, and the whole thing gets shot. And you're out. Yeah, up there.
You used the term a couple times, the black market.
Right.
Like kind of color sinister.
No. I love black markets.
Black market, the free market.
Yeah, I love black markets. Oh yeah, I'm just using a common term. I mean, it's one of the problem of communication. If I talk about white market, nobody knows what I was talking about. No, I think black markets are great. The black markets are the market popping up under terrible oppressive conditions. The market pops up again valiantly. No, I think it's great.
What do you think about what was called a few years ago the energy crisis? Jimmy Carter called it war.
It's terrific. It's great microcosm because it's an area where every single facet, I could spend a whole lecture on that very easily, every single facet of the so-called energy crisis was created by the government. Every one. 99% by the American government and about 1% by the Arab governments. Okay? And it's all product of government intervention. There is no energy shortage. It's all nonsense. It's all government. It's unbelievable mess. I mean, just unbelievable. You just go on and on. It's sort of like talking about an Alice in Wonderland picture, like a parody of government planning. And so I think, and by the way, the phrase the moral equivalent of war is pure evil. Next time you hear a politician say it, head for the bunker. Because when they talk about moral equivalent of war, they mean exactly what they say. They mean totalitarian, high taxes, regulations, and all that sort of stuff. They mean things like, for example, just by the way, in the energy crisis, I may as well get this off my chest, because not too many people have really bellyached about this. They talk about price control on oil and natural gas. One of the things which really sends me up the wall is I'm a great fan of, I hate heat, okay? I'm a great fan of cool weather. One of the things that sent me up the wall is Jimmy Carter's total smashing of air conditioning in this country. When he said air conditioning may not go below 78 degrees, which is of course nothing. It's like, you may as well not have it at all. And I think he was successful in that. I think he really, when I crossed the country last summer, even in Nevada, even the casinos in Nevada were hot. I mean, it's going pretty far. So he was successful in crushing air conditioning. I mean, it's just pure totalitarian. The idea is to make everybody feel the sacrifice, feel the pain. And by the way, with Jimmy Carter, there was one constant leitmotif of Jimmy Carter's administration, which started in his acceptance speech and continued on through the energy talk you're talking about ever since. It's one of my favorite topics. The theme, the leitmotif, was, by the way, is philosophically incorrect, to say the least, to put it very kindly. I feel your pain. Remember that? He said that. I love each and every one of you, and I feel your pain. He said that in his acceptance speech. When he said that, I was ready to punch this TV screen in, right? Obviously, he doesn't feel my pain. What is he talking about? And he kept said that in the energy speech and all, and what he of course really meant was, since he obviously got his jollies by us feeling pain, is to inflict pain on us so we can feel it, so he can feel it. Anyway, that was, I'm glad I got that off my chest. Yeah, that's there.
You said you were anti-government because blacks were against coercion to the form of taxes.
Right.
But you also stated you were still in favor of the government services that it provides, such as police and fire. Nobody's going to pay the policeman's wages to write the tickets for speeding. How do you reconcile it?
No, hold it. Look. San Francisco has a private police department, or the section, which works very well. It's paid by private people in the neighborhood, right? They pay for the route. So somebody patrols your neighborhood. And even in New York, which is demoralized at this point, There are blocks in New York and Manhattan which hire their own private policemen because it's mugging constantly. So they have this private cop there. He's not allowed to carry a gun because of the stupid government regulation, but he's at least there under the booth. And so this reduces crime almost to zero on that street. Okay. So when I'm talking about people who will pay for services, it means they will pay to defend themselves. They will not pay to be beaten up because they're carrying pot. Okay? That's obviously not going to pay for that. They will pay for services, not for being oppressed. Now, in the case of traffic situation, that's an entirely different situation. Traffic is not a really police function. You don't have to have cops running traffic. You can have meter maids and all that because traffic regulations are made and have to be made by whoever owns the roads, right? If you have a government own the roads, you have to have a government, somebody in the government, some traffic officer making sure there's no tie-up and all that. And everybody, crosses a green and right. That's perfectly legitimate. That's part of the road owning function. There are places in the United States which have private roads, like shopping centers and things like that, or private islands. There you have private guards who run the roads and make sure this happens. So the road, that's part of the road owning function. Unfortunately, in the United States, most roads are owned by government. It doesn't have to be that way. Okay? When you have private roads or private highways, then you'll have private guards, or whatever you want to call them, traffic officers, perform that function. Yeah.
Would you like to speak briefly on the Cuban Libertarian Party and your involvement and where it's grown?
Where it's what?
Where it's grown by your Libertarian Party, where it's so far in the east,
I think there's good news and there's bad news about the Libertarian Party. The good news is that we've grown a lot. The ideas are being spread quite a bit. Ideas such as I've been emitting tonight. You see them in places you didn't see before. 30 years ago, I said these same sort of things. I was called either a fascist or a Neanderthal or crazy, or all three. And now the usual reaction is, well, gee, I agree with a lot of it, but I don't think it's really practical. That's a big step forward from the previous reaction. On the other hand, we have certain problems in the party, in the movement of the party. We have certain deficiency in knowledge, certain lack of reading and things like that. The sort of thing which afflicts the general educational system in the United States. Afflicts the Libertarian Party, certain inattention to ideas and books and things like that. And if you do that, you can easily get off the track. For example, one powerful person in one powerful state party just said, why don't we have temporary rent control? Okay? Now it's that sort of thing I'm talking about. If you don't have a firm grip on the principle, it's easy to sort of slide off, especially you see the sugar plum fairies of a lot of votes and a lot of money and things coming in. So that's something that has to be guarded against. But as Jefferson said, eternal vigilance is the price of liberty, right? So I'm trying to be eternally vigilant. Okay. I thought I said the major problem was not they were not willing to work for the common good. I don't think they were. But even if they were, it wouldn't solve the socialist problem. There's no way of calculating, no way of telling them what to do. I mean, see, when you're talking about helping the poor or solving minor or marginal problem, that's something else. I'm talking now about the general social institution, economic system, where you don't know what to do, but you're told, go out and work for the collective. How do you know how to work for the collective? What are you supposed to do about it, right? You're supposed to spend all the time helping the blind. You're supposed to produce steel. And what are you supposed to do? See? And if the market doesn't tell you what to do, so to speak, then some committee, some arbitrary totalitarian committee is going to tell you what to do, and they don't know what to do either. That's essentially what I said. And as far as things like special problems in the market solves them much more readily than any kind of government. First place, the market creates a much more productive system. Standard of living goes way up. If you have a generally affluent society, as we basically have in the United States today, it's much easier to solve problems of poverty or handicap or something than if you're back in 1500 and everybody's starving. If everybody's starving, there's not much surplus left over to help blind people or anything else. So the more affluent society is, the much more likely you'll have to have these problems solved. Also, private groups are much better at this than government, to say the least. Government welfare is set up on the basis, first of all, government has unlimited funds. I mean, they get funds from the taxpayer, okay? So the government social workers' position is they essentially want to maximize their own income and power, and so they go out there. They want to find clients, so go and keep them there, so they keep their income and power up. And so you have a situation where welfare people are sort of sucked into the system and kept there in order to give power and income to the social workers or the anti-poverty workers, whatever you want to call them. Whereas the private charity system tries to get these people to help themselves as quickly as possible, get them on their feet and out of this thing as quickly as possible, which was the pre-1933 system, basically.
I have a rather philosophical question. I've lived 17 years in a communist country, so I must completely agree that 99% of people hate the system. Now, after that, I came to England. I lived there for 10 years. I've been here for 4 years now. And I was absolutely terrified how much support I found for socialism in England and even in here. And the question is, why is it that people are attracted to the doctrine? Are they playing stupid or?
It's a very interesting question. Well, Lysander Spooner said there are several classes of people who support the state. They're the knaves who get money and power out of it, the ruling class, we call it. And they're the dupes who are sucked into this, who are fooled into thinking this is really a great system. And then, of course, there's a third group of people who know what's going on and are too cowardly to say anything about it. And so it takes care of most of the population. Now, specifically, I'm not sure what motivates them. Who knows what motivates other people? It's a very chancy kind of analysis. But I think some of it is error, and others of it is deliberate. I can't imagine. For example, let me just give an instance. Go back to John Kenneth Galbraith. John Kenneth Galbraith has made a literal fortune, millions of dollars, made a career and a fortune out of denouncing affluence. Okay? The guy has got, it's true. The guy's got mansions in 3 or 4 countries. He skis at Gstaad, for 3 months every year. He's done it out of attacking affluence. Now, I can't believe this is only honest error. I just can't believe it. So you have, in other words, a conscious ruling class who's raking in the shekel. One of the things, I'm trying to write a book on the progressive period, which is the origins of statism in this country, basically, 1900 to 1920. I mean, one of the interesting things about this period, moments of the origins, you sort of see the thing happening in embryo, all the evil things starting at that point. And one of the interesting things is the science of public relations hadn't really been invented yet. These people were pretty out front in what they wanted to do. They were pretty honest and candid. For example, if somebody would be the president of the American Society of Civil Engineers, and he'd say, "We are civil engineers, this is a complex economy, therefore we should run the society. We should have power." And the physicians said that, and psychiatrists said that. Everybody's out to grab power and wealth, and they were pretty honest about it. So nowadays, of course, you don't say things like that because your PR person will say that's a no-no. But I think that there's a lot involved in that. It was said that the Lyndon Johnson's war against poverty, the only poverty he relieved was the poverty of the anti-poverty social workers. Right? We got a huge amount of grants and God knows what, jobs, grants, and the whole thing flowing into their coffers. And so I think it's pretty clear. There are obviously a lot of misguided idealists who are taking the wrong path. No question about that. We shouldn't overlook. One of my criticisms of Hayek, for example, in his great book, The Road to Serfdom, he starts off by saying that, well, socialists are just the great people that engage in this error, and it's too bad they have this error, and he's trying to convert all of them. I don't think that's really the whole story, not just pure error. So I think he now admits that.
In keeping with that question, I think you just answered it. Isn't it possible that at least many Americans who seem to be sympathetic, they don't really understand Marx, and they're caught up in the idealism without, or the so-called idealism without knowing what's involved. And very often the intellectuals are looking at it within the context of democracy, they're ignorant.
Well, there's a certain amount of illogic also, of course, involved. For example, I like to think that both conservatives and liberals want to put people in a cage with different kinds of cages. In other words, liberals want to outlaw tobacco smoking, conservatives want to outlaw pot smoking. And that really doesn't make much difference. I mean, there's a whole set of cages that each one wants to put people in. And really the logical conclusion is that all this stuff, you have to outlaw eating of sugar and all that sort of stuff. The real conclusion of all this stuff is everybody should be put in a cage and doled out the proper balanced diet of vitamins and yogurt and whatever each group wants to dole out to them, because that's better for them. Even if it is better for them, which is a dubious question, people have the right to pursue their own life, and run their own life, whether they do well or badly at it. And that's the basic libertarian position. Once you get the idea that you know best, not only know better than the other guy, but also have the right to tell him what to do, then you're in big trouble. Because then each group will then say, yeah, this guy should bow to Mecca 3 times a day, and we have like a 2 million man Gestapo to see that he does it. So that's another thing. It's the drive for power over other people. Yeah.
How can you expect an impersonal market system to take care of somebody that is poor, socially inequitable, or that type of thing? I understand that government's fairly impersonal, and you got to go through committees and subcommittees and all that. But at least there's the direct aim, the direct drive toward alleviating that problem. How can you expect an impersonal market system to take care of that?
Well, the market is not really impersonal. What the market really is in addition to being free, it's a tremendous and very efficient and excellent information spreading device. So people know what's going on, much more than any other kind of system. Not just the press, but also the price system and all that sort of stuff. So what you have is a lot of information being beamed at you. This information is not impersonal. There are people on the market. There's nothing on the market which says that you and I can't get together and form a society to aid blind people. As a matter of fact, it's being done all the time. And this is what would happen. That did happen before and will happen even more now. The point is that, and the market provides the affluence and the information to make it much easier to do that.
Well, you're just saying that it's a carryover.
No, it's not a carryover. I mean, look, the point is, presumably there's a charitable impulse in most people. Most people express the same sort of sentiment you do. And if you look at past history before the New Deal, before government relief came in, there was lots of private charity and relief, etc. The point is that as affluence becomes greater under a free market system, this provides more room for this kind of behavior, for activity. And also, you don't tax away everybody's income, so they can do that. So there's no absolute guarantees, but it certainly seems very plausible that would happen, because it's always been happening in every other country that can do it. Huh? Any country that has. I mean, the Red Cross and the Community Chest, my God, go down a whole list. I mean, the American Cancer Society, not that I think they're so great, but the point is there's a whole group, fantastic number of private welfare agencies. And other countries would be England and Western Europe in particular. And those countries which are more affluent, there's not much private welfare agencies going on in Zambia, because Zambia, everybody's sort of scrabbling along trying to survive. Okay? The more affluent the country, the more it tends to be private welfare agencies. Yeah.
Advise the Federal Reserve on what type of money, what type of aggregate to look at control inflation. I would advise the whole two classes to look at. You've got N1, N1B, N2.
Right. They don't have to look at anything. They forget all this. They could just stop buying assets. It's very simple. You tell the Federal Reserve, give them an absolute commandment, right? Don't buy any more assets. That's it. You don't have to look at anything. You don't have to worry about M1, M3, and all the rest of it. Just don't buy any more assets. Just get out of our lives. That's all they have to do. I mean, eventually I think they should be abolished. But I mean, as a short-term, immediate solution, just tell them, don't pass a law, give them an order, don't buy any more assets. Don't buy any more government securities. Don't buy any more bank advances and loans. And they said, just get out. Just shut up and get out and leave. And
I thought you were a little bit unfair to George Gilder, who caused me to burn my hand-stapple button. I wonder if you would give it as your critique of supply-side economics.
Oh, wow. All right. In the first place, I was just thinking about it on the plane coming over. Supply-side economics is a very peculiar rubric. It's sort of a portmanteau term. Okay, it's applied to almost anything. In the very broad sense, supply-side economics means being concerned with increasing production, okay, or concerned with the supply side of the economy, with with production rather than demand or money or fiscal policy. Well, in that sense, I mean, a lot of left-wing supply-siders, the income policy types like Mary Bosworth. Supply side means we have to have an income policy, have wage price control, and force these people, blah, blah, blah. There's also the guys who want to have $200 billion subsidies to this industry and that industry. That's also supply side. Okay. So these guys, of course, are outside the pale. I mean, but they're around everywhere. It's very confusing. The term supply side covers all these people. Reindustrialization, we do it by having government subsidies and planning, and we sit here in Washington, we think of the Synfuel program should go and the other program shouldn't, and Chrysler should, the big bailout, whatever it is. So we ignore that, but I just want to say that's a big thing in the supply side field. Okay? It's sort of a fashionable term now. Everybody rushes into it. Okay, now the narrow supply side, I suppose, is the Laffer curve. Okay, a concept that a big tax cut will increase government revenue proportionally, so that even more, so that because it will free the economy and increase saving and work and so forth and so on, so that you wind up with even greater total revenue you had before. The Laffer curve is essentially the way out. It was the Tan-Stoffel way out. It was the way by which the Republican candidates last election could square the circle, right? Because the thing that always impressed me is Mary McGrory. I hate to watch politicians ever, but I happened to watch the Iowa debates, if you remember them. The 8 guys, or whatever it is, Republican candidate. Mary McGrory gets up, and she gives an excellent question. She says, Mr. Bush, or whoever she addressed it to, and to everybody, you're all promising the following things: a big tax cut, right? Balanced budget, right? And keeping the same level of government services, right? Sounds like a contradiction to me. How are you going to do all this? And they all brought in the Laffer curve. They didn't mention Laffer, of course. But they said, well, you see, if you cut tax rates, the revenue would be so great, it'll wash all of that. Now, first place, there's no evidence for this, all right? I mean, I'm not saying it's inconceivable that would happen. There's no evidence for it whatsoever. I don't think it would really happen. I think, so far, some smart leftist economists, who don't seem to exist anymore, but some smart leftist economists, the way he or she could rebut the Laffer curve would be as follows. Okay, let's test the Laffer curve, fella. Let's do it the other way around. Let's raise income taxes by 20% and see if revenue falls off. I'll bet your bottom dollar that wouldn't fall off. Okay? But see, that's the way they could outfox Laffer. They haven't done it yet. But I shouldn't really publicize because somebody's going to take that. That's right. Now, I personally am in favor of any tax cut, any time, anywhere, right? I'm in favor of cutting marginal taxes, total taxes, depreciation allowances, anything of any size. So I'm sympathizing with Laffer people in that respect. I'm in favor of cutting taxes regardless of what happens to the budget. On the other hand, because for one thing, even if there's a bigger deficit, which I think there would be, why should a tax be better than a deficit? I mean, tax is pure evil. A deficit is just half evil. Okay? In other words, at least if you have even if the deficit were inflationary, right? At least even if your Wonder Bread would now cost $2 a loaf instead of 70 cents a loaf because of the deficit, at least you're still getting Wonder Bread. The taxes, you're getting nothing except heartache. Okay? So in other words, the tax is the worst possible thing. On the other hand, I think that Laffer curve is pure demagogy. I think they know it. I think these people really know it. I really do. I think it's pure political demagogy. And because I asked Laffer, I met him at Chicago, and I asked him, well, look, supposing it doesn't work, and supposing you're on the other side of the Laffer curve, and also, there's no time dimension in the Laffer curve. In other words, he really says it's instantaneous. I mean, obviously, it's not going to be instant. You can't gear up and produce twice as much in two weeks. Maybe you work in 5 years. No, it's supposed to be instantaneous. So I asked him that, and this is the position Irving Kristol takes as sort of the guru, the political philosophy guru of the supply of Laffer people. And they both have really the same answer. They really say it's all demagogy. In other words, they really say, what Laffer really said was, look, by the time they get the tax cut, they'll love it so much they wouldn't care about the deficit, about the revenue and all that. Right? That's really what it amounts to. It's all a shuck. It's a scam. The whole thing is a scam. And even though in a sense I'm sympathetic because I like to see taxes cut anyway, it really redounds against you. I don't want to be, sort of a cliche preacher here, but some people might remember it. Public memory might be short. I remember it for 6 months. By God, it didn't work. We cut taxes and revenue fell off, and then we're sunk. So yeah.
When we talk about taxes, our institution of public education, which is supported primarily by local taxes, propose, I assume from what you're saying, no taxes or those taxes are better.
Right.
How would we finance something like that? I would say private education, but this is a
I would.
long tradition of education. What would you propose?
Private's a long tradition. Private education is a long tradition too, fortunately.
But you would think that this could replace our public education?
Sure, be beautiful. And look, public education, I don't know how it is here. I come from New York. I admit it's a sort of a skewed sample, because in New York, nobody says that kids get educated at all. It's out.
Something else, though.
Well, but I mean, it's a multi-billion-dollar school system. I attended an education conference a couple of years ago which included liberals, leftists, right-wingers, a whole spectrum of people. And they started off by stipulating, all of them admitted that public schools don't educate, right? They stipulate, okay, we admit they don't educate. However, what was the argument? The argument of the liberals, the last people left really in favor of the public school system. The argument they gave in favor of public education was it was a massive babysitting device. You get the kids out of your hair for 8 hours or whatever, and the taxpayers pay for it. That's really what it amounts to, but they weren't in the public school. They can pick up in 3 weeks at Berlitz or at some course or whatever. So now, of course, my answer to that is in New York City, where we're on the cutting edge of America, it's no longer a babysitting function. It's worth your life to enter the public school system in New York. So anybody who can possibly do it gets their kid out of the public school and gets them in the private school, even though, of course, you're paying double. You're paying your taxes to the rotten public school system plus the tuition you have to pay to the private school system. So what I would advocate as a transition, in a sense, is to have tax credits for private tuition. In other words, if you pay $5,000 a year for private school, you should be able to deduct that from your income tax off the top. Not deductible, but as a tax credit off the top.
But that isn't due because it's tax supported. That's because something has happened to our teaching staff.
It all fits in. Look, let's put it this way. Supposing there's all sorts of controversial things about education. I mean, there are a whole bunch of topics which you can go either way. You can have traditional or progressive education, sex education or no sex education, religious education or no religious education, a whole bunch of things, right? Whichever way any public school system decides, somebody's going to be hurt. Some large group of parents and children will be hurt because their wishes will be overridden. If you have a private school system, anybody will go to any darn school they want. The religious people support religious schools and whatever. And you have a whole spectrum of schools fulfilling the desires of the various groups of parents and students. You can't have that in public school system. However way they decide, some large group of people are going to be smashed. Will feel they've been oppressed by the decision. Even if you have a great public, even if everything else is great, you still have the inherent nature of the public school system that it's coercing a whole bunch of people, either a majority or a large minority of parents and students. But you don't have it. It's like, look, it's as if there's only one bread in the world. The tradition has always been the government always makes bread. Okay? Everything else is free, but the government has to make bread. And then the question is, what kind of bread do they make? And there's a big conflict. There's only one bread for each city or each town. Should it be Wonder Bread type? Should it be Pepperidge Farm? Should it be this health crap and all that sort of thing? And there's a big conflict over this, right? However, whichever way the government decides, a lot of bread users will be oppressed by this. They won't be able to get the bread they want. So as soon as you have government, you have a coercive decision almost automatically.
Amen.